So African Masks. This show was set to be up for the month of March, but with the coronavirus and all of that chaos, we aren't able to access the gallery where the masks were being held. But we wanted to have this discussion to reach out to anyone that missed anything in the first reception that we held regarding like how the show kind of came together and what the show is like being aimed to represent. So we have the gallery crew, Matt Raming and Ari Montford with us to discuss African masks. But I think something like maybe we should start off with how the show kind of started, like how, like, yeah, these pictures were us meeting at the National Center for African-American Artists, and that is Dr. Barry Gaither, who is the museum director, and basically we came to the museum and we had all these masks laid out in front of us on the tables, and Barry gave us a brief like lecture with each mask just to describe kind of its origins and everything else that like really happened after that, which kind of leads into the topics of like cultural appropriation and cultural exchange. Matt, I don't know if you want to like hop in on this at any point, but like
it was interesting to see. It was interesting to see masks from like, because we were able to get a survey. We could see things from different places and I guess understand different aesthetic choices that different cultures would have taken. Because I think you can look at the mask and see the similarities and the difference between like cultures, you know, because the ones that are of the female like figures, they all have a similar shape. They have a similar like lip ratio to eye ratio. Like even just looking at them, you get this understanding of geography, and you get this understanding, and I mean that in like a understanding of place that you don't have because you haven't been, and you don't like get it in your everyday history class or even just in world life. I mean, I very rarely think about Asia just because I'm not it's not a part of my, you know, and I think that seeing work that is so separate from our reality, but also so attached to our reality was powerful. It was powerful, and like you say, to hear Dr. Barry talk about where these come from, like how they're used. Him talking about the influence they had on modernism and then I guess at one point the newest evolution of art and the big birth of the way we make contemporary work now too is very related to these masks, and it's powerful information to think about, and it was incredibly moving for me to be able to engage with these items and engage you all in conversation about them.
This material, this is Ari Montford talking. This material was brought to us in a way which, as I understand it, was one of the first times that such an exhibition was held at Montserrat. And it was done in an attempt, and Matthew, you're touching on it, to raise the question of modernism and how it was impacted by other cultures. And specifically in this case, it was African culture, African art, and masks, which were not really considered to be quote unquote art, but really part of a cultural reference with regard to how one experiences living in an African cultural experience. And so when we compare it with and bring into the discussion what Dr. Gaither was representing, was mindful of us to give consideration to this idea of what is appropriation, and that's what I was concerned about in bringing these objects to the campus, and that in our studio practice we can really talk about how other cultures have informed us in this present process. And I was really struck by some of the images that are I'm looking at right now seem to really give reverence to the importance of these objects and how they have impacted what it is we do in studio. And the sense of how we as, and all of us at Montserrat are creatives, and how that it continues to inform how we move forward. We have to, in my view, give a real strong bow, if you will, or bow, if you will, to, or nod, if you will, to what came before us, and this is work that has truly impacted how we see the aesthetic notion of culture versus the functional notion of a culture. So give me your thoughts.
Yeah, very, very, very well said. I think that last thing you mentioned has been exceptionally prevalent to me, and in the work that I'm making now. We're talking about this idea of taking culture from practice and moving it into studio, and then also talking about the difference between aesthetic culture and practice culture. And I think those are all really powerful things to think about, especially when we're making this work, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, in anything, if you're not making work and you're an African person or whatever, if you're making work and you're living in Boston, you're painting the city of Boston, you're trying to reflect the reality of that situation. And I think that these masks can help people do that and bounce and have that conversation in their own studio practices, because they're understanding that the work doesn't come from nowhere, you know? I think a lot of the times as artists, we sometimes delude ourselves into thinking that, you know, we are the beginning of the work, but the work is a product of our environment. And we just, you know, it just passes.
One of the pieces that, I don't have the text in front of me, but it makes clear reference to modernism and the artists from the Cubist period who might have been impacted by the work. So
Is that the first mask?
yeah, that one. Yes. So in looking at that work, we can perhaps see how Modigliani may have been impacted by that work in terms of it being an incredible source material for him to work with, as well as Picasso and others from that period. And I think that's very important for our community of creatives to sort of fully embrace and engage in dialogue with, that there's this real ongoing connection between artists from all backgrounds and generations, that making work has its formal aspect, but at the same time, there's a real connection to how culture impacts what we experience. And certainly in the 20th century, there was incredible influence from other cultures on the European canon in terms of how we come to see our world today. What was the material of the piece? I don't recall. Was it?
I think it's wood
They're
and kaolin.
Was it painted or was it somehow
I think it's like a clay dye.
Yep.
clay?
It's a clay dye.
And the piece is actually wood.
Yep.
Hmm.
So this idea of integration of material, I think, is important to sort of underscore there, and how artists in the 20th century till today really explore notions of work with the material. Then materiality of the work is significant in terms of how it impacts the spiritual work, and in terms of where it comes from, how it manifests itself. And I certainly am not going to profess to be a scholar with regard to these masks, but what I really wanted to, in my connection with this experience, was to bring light to the museum itself and its collection, and how our institution can be more involved with the material there, and to actually see this as a window or door opening. We can enter into this other realm or other world in terms of connecting our, again, creative selves with other cultures, and in a manner which is not secondhand, so to speak. This is a first source. So I hope going forward we will be able to bring more and actually go there and have this symbiotic, if you will, relationship.
Something, how we're talking about the the pretty much like the surface of like the physicality of like these masks. Like I thought it was really interesting when I'm gonna try to find the image, but when Barry was talking about like the scarring and like the symmetry of each of the masks,
Yes.
I feel like that's also like kind of just to branch off what you were saying about like their effect on like modernism.
Yes.
Um, I was actually really curious, like, and I guess I still kind of am, like how these designs were like made, like where did they come from, like how we talk about this like this other like conversation about how like artists, there's always something that an artist based something off of, whether you know what it's from or not. And I'm just curious like where like
And
these
say that's
scarring
a
things
wonderful
come.
sort of experience that comes from the exhibition, will now allow us to perhaps go forward and ask those questions, which would require us to have more involvement with the museum and more involvement with searching these questions out in terms of resolving them, because they will help to inform our work. They'll help to inform what we see and understand, um, and to give it a certain level of scholarship. Important to do as we go forward with future discussions about other cultures and other experiences. I know that uh, the administration and the new president is very, very interested in how we really look at Montserrat being a global institution. And so these are the kinds of questions and that will aid us going forward.
Yeah,
Definitely.
there were also like a couple of these masks that were like, these were women as
Mhm.
like a identity
Yes.
that they were taking on. And I thought that was interesting too. And like he also said that there were only like in the terms of the performers themselves, they were only like male performers that took on these roles, which
Right.
is also interesting in the sense that um like there were all these like rules that kind of surrounded
Well, it is interesting when you think of European Renaissance performances, they were oftentimes males who were playing females, and the plays, and when you think of classic sort of things that are the Edwardian sort of a process. So that's an interesting sort of cultural comparison that can be made on, and it's worthwhile doing so to know that these similarities exist throughout all cultures in terms of how they function. Um, but it is really important that the notion of art in an African experience is more of a 20th century or it's actually 19th century sort of construct. You know, that it's and art as we even think of it, right? I mean, art as we think of it is a contemporary is a 19th, 20th century construct. I mean, art for art's sake. How long art for art's sake in that regard? What does that mean in terms of image making? So these works really serve a purpose, continuing to inform creatives and how we interpret the world.
Yeah, I think there's also sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it's interesting to now see, like as Ari's talking about, as this art for art's sake kind of movement goes away, what's beginning to see a resurgence is work that looks or that kind of plays off of these cultural objects. You look at Simone Leigh's work, and there's all of this reference to, I guess, what could be quote unquote craft-esque, or most potters are going back to a look that's less polished and more earth tones. You're starting to see weavers in South America make a big jump, and I think it's interesting to see how those lines are like cyclical, and that stuff is happening too. I think that's very interesting to see what's going on.
I think it's also like interesting to like, I think just to make this comment is like super important. Like there's so much of these masks that like I feel like even to have a show kind of take away like a big part of what they are as objects. And like there's whole costumes that go with these masks, and to kind of to take that part away from just the masks on the wall, I feel like it kind of like might go against like that's what makes it so hard to display this culture and like do it like correctly, and to be inclusive of all these conversations still.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely where the museum as an institution, like not just our little gallery or um, Dr. Gaither's gallery in a museum in Roxbury, but museum professionals as a whole have to now change the way they think about curating work so that these objects and objects that are being made now that are kind of like them have to be better like cared for. It's no longer white cube scenarios, because we're now understanding that our idea is shifting about what a work is supposed to look like. Ari talks about art being a construct, and I think that's very true, and that's a huge plus of showing this work to our peers now as they're making work now, because now they can engage in doing that work in their practice, so that when museums can make the shift, they have work to support that shift as well. Yep. So I think it is a difficult challenge, and it is a part of the conversation that we definitely have to have. But I'm hopeful,
Mm-hmm. No, I think that also kind of goes with the idea of how trade masks go into this as well, like because that's kind of where that started.
Right.
And it's actually kind of interesting because like even these masks, which like the ones on the wall are kind of trade masks. They kind of became trade masks after the fact because they're not in their original place.
They're not
But
being balanced. Yeah.
yeah, but then when we were selecting the masks, like we had kind of taken like disqualified the actual trade masks because in
We
terms
made
of
sound.
those,
Made
for
sound.
everyone who doesn't know, like the trade masks that were at the museum, they were crafted differently than these masks.
Yes.
Sorry, I
If
didn't
you
mean to
look
cut
at
you off. Ari, was that you
I
speaking?
just wanted to say that you as curators, I saw myself more as an advisor in the process. You as curators, I think, made a sound choice regarding the work selected for the exhibition in terms of the trade mask versus the more traditional pieces, which we wound up showing. So I just wanted to emphasize that there was an integrity that we were successful, I think, in presenting to the exhibition. Further wanted to go up with what Matthew was indicating about other artists and images, how they connect with the work historically too, a little bit about going forward. Nick Cave, an artist who has done for years now a whole series of work called Sound Suits, and they have a clear reference to sources that are from a more traditional African cultural experience. And I see that as another further sort of development of how we continue that dialogue going forward, that this work has really informed a whole um, uh, direction, if you will, in creative practice.
Yes. 100% agree. I really enjoy those pieces by Nick Cave. I love those work a lot. Yeah.
I was really struck when we were there how all of you were moved by the experience. That's what struck me so much, and the idea of handling the work. I mean, I'm not sure how many times in your lives you've actually handled artwork that
That was my first
has
time.
this incredible sort of. I mean, I'm the one who transported the pieces from the gallery, and I was like, I was just a vehicle. I mean, there was this incredible, powerful experience that I have rarely had in my life, and there was just this energy that was really quite there. I can't express to you that the sense of it was moving. I mean, those are not experiences that I've had in my life where I've been um, transporting work of that nature and having that uh, connection in that way. Uh, so, and I know from what I'm seeing, what I saw, that it was the day you were there at the museum was quite a powerful experience. I think that is something all individuals who love art really should have in some particular way, and I think that's what I'm hoping we can continue to encourage at Montserrat, that we have this sort of connection with work that will help to inspire us to make more or better work or engage.
Yeah.
I think even for what the school even offers now, like I've kind of had like the same sort of feeling, like even just going to artist talks and like I wasn't even really expecting like to have gotten so much information about something that I haven't even really gotten to know so much. Like I hadn't learned about it prior to going to the museum. Like to be able to have like a conversation with like an artist or like a museum director, I feel like when you're given that opportunity, I feel like there's so much that comes out of it. And it was like I've thought about these things since going.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's the purpose of your education at this point. Yay.
Yeah, I agree.
But in terms of like the people that we're shouting out here,
Yes.
We want to thank Dr. Barry Gaither, who is the museum director at National Center for African-American Artists.
Yes.
And also his assistant, Carol Murray, who also, I think, did she help with the like labels and packaging of everything?
She sure did. And she was very instrumental in that process of providing information for us regarding the installation of the work. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's stuff you could talk about with this endlessly, of course.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think we've covered the really important stuff, and hopefully this isn't the first time that we do work like this, so there'll be space to have continued conversation off of this work that we're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this was like actually a very different and a very big show for the space as it was. Like, I don't like for the shows that I've worked on with the Bear Gallery, like this one had definitely so much more like education to follow it, and also like the impact, like a social impact, and also just like just having this conversation, I think, is kind of pointing in a direction where maybe like we should be talking about these things some more, like with our classes and things, and trying to like understand like how we make art. And
Yes.
it's kind of like the philosophy, I feel like, of what is going on in the background of making art. I don't know if I made that sound right, but
No, I understood completely what you said. I hope other people at home understand, but yeah, because it does expand the conversation, you know? It does
yeah.
expand the conversation. Like one of the things I've been thinking about is how the conversation around like speaking about race and culture and art also has to be expanded to really deal with this idea of being post-colonial and post-colonization, because that's essentially where the root of these issues come from. And it's you seeing other places make the step towards having that kind of conversation, places that are less divided by race issues. But you see it happening in this work too, because it connects us to a place, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of the missing thing in the conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what both of you are touching on right now is really the essence of how the exhibition and other similar exhibitions going forward can create that conversation.
Yeah.
Or at the very minimum, help to create that conversation, or to create the space for that conversation to occur. And
100%.
Yeah, definitely.
all of it and I don't know if this is appropriate to say at this point, but it all supports what I think the President Steinberg has been about, is that notion of how do we all celebrate creative life? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
my.
Oh, great. Well, thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This has been good. I'm glad that we were able to somehow find a way to meet up.